Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Tonight we're diving into some of the most terrifying stories you'll ever hear. These are real accounts from people who lived through absolute nightmares. I'm warning you now, these stories will not let you sleep tonight, so turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Story 1. Missed being killed by a serial killer. Back in about 2000 or 2001, I was driving by myself from visiting my mum in Colorado back to Arizona. I was in a station wagon and had a desk my mum had given me that was my grandfather's. I've always been scared driving at night that there is someone in my back seat that is going to get me. This might be because of too many scary movies or because my mum's paranoia rubbed off on me. I was in the army and drove back and forth a lot to visit her. She would get mad at me for sleeping at rest stops or gas stations and tell me someone was going to kidnap me and kill me. But I just didn't want to be bothered with the hassle and expense of a motel most of the time. I digress. So I'm driving an empty stretch of highway late at night with no other cars around. This red truck comes up behind me, flashing his lights and honking his horn at me. I was thinking to myself that there was something wrong with my car, or maybe there was something wrong with the desk in the hatchback, because why else would he be so insistent on me pulling over? So I pull over, I was in my mid-20s and still a bit naive, and get out of my car. As I'm getting out of my car, he's directly behind me, and still flashing his lights and honking his horn. I got to about the middle of the car. I planned on going to the back to see what could have been wrong with my car, when it hit me. Why is he still honking at me when I'm out of my car? That's odd. Then he gets out of his truck. That's when I knew something just wasn't right. I jumped back in my car and sped off. The next exit was 45 miles or so away. He followed me the entire time. I take the first exit and go to a crowded grocery store with a laundromat next to it. There was an ambulance parked at the laundromat with its lights flashing, and I was next to it. I figured if there was an ambulance, then, eventually, a police officer should come. The man stayed in his truck in the grocery store parking lot, watching me the entire time. I was terrified. I did not want to get out of my car and felt like an idiot if I would have had to tell someone what happened. I waited about an hour, and he finally left. After he left, I waited a little longer before continuing my drive back to Arizona. I was paranoid and watchful for any red trucks the entire time. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years. I'm watching Unsolved Mysteries or some similar type crime show with my hubby at the time. He knew what happened as we were dating when it happened. And what story pops up? One about a man on that exact stretch of highway with a red truck that used those exact tactics to get a few women to pull over and murdered them. I really am glad my gut told me something was wrong and to get back in my car and drive. That was a close call that still sends chills down the spine, but our next story takes a different turn, from the open highway to the supposed safety of home. Sometimes, the most terrifying things happen in the places we feel most secure. Story 2. I should have read the reviews. My girlfriend moved out 3 weeks ago. My cat Rook was really close to her, and now that she's gone, I can tell he's a bit lonely. Especially when I'm at work. I came home a few times to my curtains ripped up, or all the toilet paper in shreds. The last straw was when I came home after working late to find he had clawed a hole the size of a dinner plate into the side of the sofa. I decided I had to do something. I tried different toys, even catnip, but nothing worked. One night while browsing Amazon, I saw a pet camera. It's a tiny camera that records your pet on a live feed, so you can monitor their behaviour while you're away. It even has an audio function so you can talk to them. Sounded silly, but hey, I love my furry dude, so I bought it. I got overnight shipping and installed it immediately. I decided to set it up in my bedroom, as that was where Rook dwelled most. My first day at work, I think I checked that camera 30 times. When I spoke into the microphone, Rook seemed to be happier, and I noticed there was no destruction around the house either. By day 4, I figured I'd solved the problem with Rook. That leads me to right now. About 30 minutes ago, I climbed in bed with Rook, ready to close my eyes when my phone buzzed. A notification from the pet cam. I almost ignored it, Sure, I'd just triggered the thing, but I opened it anyway. What I saw made my grip tighten on the phone. Instead of a video of myself in bed, I saw a man, tall, gangly, with pale skin and large eyes. He was moving into my room with exaggerated steps like a sneaking cartoon character. He got right up to the lens, so close I could almost smell his rotten breath, and he smiled. I immediately paused the video, terrified. I looked at the spot where the man should have been standing, but there was no one there. I went onto Amazon and found the pet cam and read the reviews, hoping for some weird glitch. It had to be a joke, right? The first dozen reviews were pretty standard, but it was the last that caused me to bolt upright. The customer complained that the camera was on a time delay, sometimes as much as 15 minutes. I went back to the video and pressed play with shaky fingers. I watched in horror as the man slithered under my bed, giving the camera a wink before disappearing in the darkness. Then I saw myself enter the room and climb in bed before the video ended. Now I'm sitting in my bed, knowing he's under it. I could call the police, but I doubt I'd have time. So please do yourselves a favour and read the reviews. Transition to next story. The thought of someone hiding in your home is terrifying enough. But what about when reality itself starts to betray you? Our next story explores what happens when time becomes your enemy. Story 3. Birthday Girl. Good morning, sunshine. Time to wake up. I open my eyes and see Nurse Judy, ready to give me my morning injection. I sit on the bed and roll up my pajamas sleeve. I feel the needle under my skin and the medication flowing inside my veins. The nurse gives me a wide smile. Good girl, you can go to the canteen now and have breakfast with your friends. Friends? I don't have friends here. My friends are almost 60 miles away from me, enjoying life, learning new stuff, making out at parties, certainly not spending their youth in a psychiatric ward. My parents put me there. It was after another anxiety attack at school. I lost control and tried to do something stupid. Now everything seems stupid to me. I pass by Nutsy Nora's room. Her yelling is impossible to ignore. She keeps screaming Kelly and Jenna over and over again, whatever these names mean. I see 2 doctors rushing to her room with a set of tranquilizers. This place is full of people like her. I don't think I belong here. I enter the canteen and hear a loud, "Surprise!" I look around and see other patients gathered around a cake with number candles, 1 and 7, and an inscription, "Happy birthday, Robin." Right, it's my 17th birthday. Yay, I totally forgot. I force myself to smile and blow the candles. The cake tastes like soap, or a cough syrup. I hide both candles in my pockets when nobody's watching. I guess it's the only gift I can count on today. I stop one of the nurses on the way back to my room. I ask if my parents are going to see me. She shrugs and walks away without saying a word. Bitch. As I lay in bed, I stretch my arms and look at my hands. They look so weird, so damn weird. Maybe it's a side effect of one of those medications. Nurse Judy interrupts my contemplation. She storms in with an afternoon dosage of pills. How are you feeling, my dear? Did you like the birthday surprise? She asks, with that annoyingly sweet smile. Yeah, I forgot today's the day. She takes my hand and says, Oh, don't worry, darling, it happens to everybody. As she holds my hand, I ask her why my skin looks so strange. Nurse Judy gives me a sympathetic gaze. I think it's normal at your age, don't you think so, sweetie? Is she trying to make a fool of me? Oh, I've had enough. But I'm only 17, I say imploringly. I don't know any other teenager with hands like these. Just look. I take the candles out of my pocket and almost rub them in her face. You see, 1 and 7. 17, I bellow. Judy gently takes the candles from my shaking hands. Robin, it's not 17. Let me show you the right order. It's 7 and 1. 71. Sometimes the horror isn't supernatural. It's all too human. Our next story's a long one, but it's a harrowing account of a near miss with pure evil. This one will stay with you. Story 4. I went to a serial killer's lair. The year was approximately 1998 to 1999. I was a young gay man in my early 20s, living in a medium-sized city in the Midwestern US. This was sort of an in-between, transitional time for gay people, where in most populous areas we had enough respect to live openly, but there were still plenty of people who did not like us. It was well before the invention of smartphones, and the internet was still in the early stages of mass adoption. There were large communities online, but it was not yet at the point where most Americans were online. Online socialization consisted of chat rooms, hosted by various services like AOL, Yahoo, or IRC servers, and message boards were still in use by large numbers of people. For gay men at that time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Prior to the internet and to the broader cultural changes, gay men had been stuck looking for fun in secretive and or shady places due to the inability to freely express ourselves. In the 90s, it was still somewhat risky, but the internet offered a way to talk freely and relatively anonymously, without the risk of being outed or worse. For this reason, it really took off in the gay communities, and gay men were a very large part of the user bases for these social platforms. It was suddenly very easy and relatively safe to find dates, friends, or just sex, and it quickly became the norm for a lot of gay men. On the other hand, being such a new communication tool for most people, we were sometimes blind to the risks. Being an attractive young man in my prime, I made liberal use of online communities to find dates. That is to say, I had plenty of hookups. My city had a decent number of chat rooms and personals message boards, and I had mostly great experiences. I met the typical assortment of good guys, closet cases, and weirdos that you'd expect. I wasn't an absolute hoe by most standards, but suffice to say that a cute gay at that time could generally have a lot more dates than your typical straight person, LOL. At some point during this time, I'd had some brief chat on a message board with a guy from my city. I forget his screen name. It's been over 20 years. So let's call him Slim Guy 65. This back and forth had happened on a general thread in the gay section, not in private messages, so it was visible to anyone who chose to read that thread. Nothing had come of it, but about a week later, I received an email from an unrecognized address. The email basically said, "Hey, I'm not gay and I don't agree with the gay lifestyle. I'm here because my friend met this Slim Guy 65 person from this message board, and the guy really hurt him. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. My friend tried to tell the police, but they wouldn't do anything. I see you were talking to Slim Guy 65, so just be careful and stay away from him." Okay, that's strange. What does this person mean by really hurt him? Was his heart broken? Did he get beaten up or verbally abused or what? I responded to the email asking for clarification on what exactly happened. I never received a response. I was slightly weirded out by it, but on the other hand, it's an anonymous email from someone who doesn't respond and is vague about their warning. This could be anything. It could be some disgruntled ex trying to mess with the guy. It could be a real warning about someone gay bashing. It could be someone trolling who doesn't have anything to do with anyone. I kept it in the back of my mind, but pretty much shrugged it off. Several weeks later, I had a weekday off work and decided to take to the internet to fish for some say, as was my custom. Lo and behold, I had an email response to a personal ad. It was Slim Guy 65. He was offering to meet at his place to hang out and just have a good time. Wink wink, nudge nudge. I won't go into details, and as I recall, there weren't really many details discussed other than the small talk and intros we'd done previously. Nothing about this guy was really sounding interesting to me, but I had no other offers on this day, so I decided why not. I'll go see what this dude is about. As I typed my reply, I suddenly remembered the strange email I'd received warning about this person. I went back and reread it. Still vague, still presenting more questions and no answers. Should I take this anonymous warning at face value and just ignore SG65? Here. I decided to go check him out anyway. His address was on a rather busy street in the middle of a dense residential area, not some shack out in the woods, and I can handle myself. If he's weird, I can just fuck out of there. Before long, I arrived at the house at the agreed time. It was a duplex-style house, with one apartment on the ground floor and one on the second floor, part of a row of several identical duplexes. It was the middle of the afternoon. There was plenty of traffic on the street, and the occasional person out on their porch or in their backyard. I pulled up the driveway to the parking area behind the house, got out and knocked on the door. The guy that answered was a pretty normal, kind of mousy-looking man, probably in his 40s, slight slim build, soft-spoken, looked like any guy working in an office cubicle somewhere. Not really my type, but honestly, my curiosity was piqued, and I had nothing better to do, so I stepped inside to take a look around and gauge the situation, with the warning email fresh in my mind. I stepped into the back door, into the kitchen. It was very clean and there was nothing out on the counters, and no table and chairs or anything. That is to say, it did not look like someone was living there. It had been kept up and cleaned, but looked empty. Looking out into the apartment, I could see that it was not set up as a living space. A large window with sliding glass was between the kitchen and living room, and I could see what looked like a large table out in the living room area. SG65 said something like, "This isn't where I live. A friend of mine used to run a doctor's office here. I maintain the building for him. It's private though, we have the place to ourselves." Weird, okay. He shut the back door and locked it with a keyed deadbolt, the kind that you need a key to open, even from the inside, and put his keys back in his pocket, saying, "So what do you want to do? Yes, why?" At this point, my danger sense spiked. This is not a normal home, and why is he locking the door like that? It's not necessarily suspect. A lot of people have that sort of lock on their door, and the door has a window, so it even makes sense. Still, something is not right here, I can tell, and now I'm locked in. I asked him why he was locking the door like that, which immediately flustered him. He was looking rather nervous and his voice was a little wavery and halting. Not quite stuttering, but almost. He said, well, we don't want someone to come in and interrupt us, right?" Flashing a weak, unconvincing smile. His demeanour and body language were all I needed to confirm that this guy was up to no good, or at least there was something he was hiding. However, I could tell that I was intimidating him. I was not a particularly muscular kid, but I have a larger frame. Like, even when I'm at my very thinnest, I will still wear size L tops and 36 waist pants. So I look big, which people tend to interpret as me being stronger than I really am. Also, I'm not a tough guy at all, but I have a resting facial expression that makes me look like a badass thug. People who don't know me often assume that I'm rough or something. I sometimes use this to my advantage while I can, because before long, a new acquaintance will eventually figure out that I am a total wimp, lol. But this was definitely an occasion to play up the tough guy appearance, and I did exactly that. I put on my best steely face and told him to unlock the door, and that I don't want to be locked in here. He looked for a moment like he was going to pee his pants, then he said, "Okay, all right, I'll unlock this." He unlocked the deadbolt, and "I'll just lock the knob here," and he turned the little dial that locks the doorknob. That was fine with me. I continued to stare at him until he said, "I'll leave the keys on the counter right here," and he set his keys down near the sink. I was relatively satisfied with that answer. At this point, though, my adrenaline was flowing. I was almost in full fight-or-flight mode, but I was kind of stuck in place. The guy was between me and the door. I was freaked out. But this little weasel did not appear to pose any immediate physical threat to me. I could tell that his pant pockets were empty, and that I was intimidating the living hell out of him. I didn't know yet exactly what to do. Now keep in mind that despite my wordy descriptions, this all happened very quickly, without any really long pauses. It had only been maybe 1 to 2 minutes since I had stepped in the door. This all happened at the pace of a conversation. The guy was obviously nervous and trying not to appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in," and walked a wide path around me, through the kitchen into what would normally be the living room, and toward the hall to the right from there. I was familiar with this floor layout. It is very common in this area. The hallway would lead to 2 small bedrooms, with a bathroom in between them. I hesitated, thinking I should just walk out that back door and take off. But really, now I was super curious. I knew there's no way in hell I'm doing anything with this guy, but I kind of want to see what's going on in here. Also, I'm confident that he can't take me if it comes to a fight. So, I slowly headed toward the living room. It felt like I was walking in slow motion. From the kitchen entrance, I could see a large, rectangular, stainless steel table taking up a lot of the living room. I remember thinking this looks like a surgical table. It looked like it could rise and tilt, and it had a recessed channel running all the way around the edge. In hindsight, I now know what that was. It was 100% a mortician's table. Dude had a mortician's table in there, but at that time, I thought it looked like a medical table of some sort. There was some other office-type cabinets and stuff around, I think, but now all I really remember is the table in that room. The large front window looking out onto the street was covered by vertical blinds that were closed. SG65 said something like, "This used to be a doctor's office, like I said. Come on back here." The hallway revealed the room setup that I expected. The first bedroom door was closed. The second door was open to a small, very clean bathroom. At the end of the hall was the other bedroom, which looked like, if the doctor's office story was true, had at one time been converted to an exam room. He said, "We can go in that room if you want. Go ahead, take a look." And he stayed by the other closed bedroom door. The back bedroom door was open, and I could see that the walls were covered in a honey-coloured wood panelling, the type you might see in a den or office that hasn't been updated since the early 1970s. I slowly took a few steps down to that door, trying to be very aware of what Mr. Creepy was doing behind me. He didn't move. When I got up to that room, the first thing I noticed was the door had a keyed deadbolt lock, like the back door. This room locked from the outside. I wondered if there was a lever on the inside, but I pretty much knew the answer to that question, without needing to check. I also saw a chair, a non-swiveling plastic desk chair with thin metal legs, sitting near the centre of the room. The room had old, dark carpet and those wood-panelled walls. I noticed that the walls were completely panelled with no windows, and I know that room had at least one window, probably two, so whoever did that panelling went over the windows. There was also a phone in there, plugged in and sitting on the floor. It was an old office phone, probably from around the 80s or early 90s. Dingy beige plastic with several buttons to manage different phone lines. Just sitting on the carpet near the wall, with the chair at a slight distance facing the phone. There was nothing else in that room. I was standing at the threshold of that room, with one foot slightly in, absolutely not going past that door. I looked back at Dude. He was still standing by that other door, just nervously smiling at me, trying hard to look casual, but obviously very nervous or something. He said something like, "Well, what do you want to do?" Instead of answering, I felt around the backside of the D-bolt lock. Sure enough, nothing there but the smooth wood of the door. It also dawned on me that I did not see a light switch anywhere for the ceiling lamp. Where was the switch? Who knows? It should have been just inside the door, of course, but that original switch was covered up by the panelling. He mumbled something about not having the key to that lock. "Don't worry about it." I turned back to face the guy and just said, "What is it that you want to do here?" My skin had gone ice cold as I realised that I was way, way, way too far into this apartment. I was running through my options in my head. What is this guy going to do? He doesn't appear to have any weapon or anything in reach, but who the fuck knows what goes on in this place? What are you trying to do? He was almost totally derailed by that. He stammered out, "Some hot, man-to-man fun," with the weakest smile I've ever seen, looking like he was just a hair's breadth away from panicking. That sounds comical, but really, that sentence was probably the most chilling part of the entire experience for me. It was the way he said it, like he had to come up with something on the fly, something that would sound plausible, and he failed. Who says that in real life? "Hey, do you want to have some hot man-to-man fun?" Nobody. It's something you'd see on an advertisement for a cheesy porn site or something. Some hot man-to-man Fun, smiled quivering lips. That was it. I said, "Nope, I want to go, I'm leaving." He said, okay. I quickly walked past him as he flattened himself against the wall to avoid me, and I noped right out through the living room dissection area and through the kitchen to the back door, which was thankfully still not deadbolted. The keys were still on the counter. I let myself out of the door and didn't bother closing that, as I saw him slowly coming to the door behind me. I deliberately walked, not ran, to my car. Looking back at the building, I could see that indeed there was a window facing the backyard area from that panelled room, but of course it was covered up from the inside. Dude was shutting and locking the back door, and I left, heart pounding, skin icy cold, thinking, holy fuck, what was that? So, was this guy some kind of killer? Or was he just an awkward, closeted gay guy with access to a sterile-looking apartment with an autopsy/mortuary table and a windowless room that locks from the outside, with a chair and a phone and no light switch? It's clear to me that the poor soul who walks into that room gets locked in. He probably shuts off the light from somewhere and calls the phone. Other than that, it's anyone's guess what happens. I assume the friend of the judgmental person who emailed me must have been some kid that got locked in for whatever game ensues. Driving home, at first I thought of course I have to call the police and tell them what's in that place. But thinking it through, I realised I didn't really have any crime to tell them about. I went to meet a man for casual sex. And what? He has a room with a chair in it? He has, as I thought at the time, an exam table. The police aren't going to do anything with that story. The guy didn't touch me or do anything to me, and I left. I considered calling an anonymous tip line, but again, what exactly would I report? There was no actionable crime. Also, keep in mind that at that time, while the local police in this city were pretty decent, they weren't especially interested in getting involved with helping the gays. They'd prosecute actual crimes if it was cut and dry, but I'd heard plenty of accounts of them not choosing to follow up on cases where there was not an easy arrest to be made. I decided not to report anything because nothing would come of it except drawing unwanted attention to myself. Even in retrospect, I think that was probably the most rational choice to make. If this happened today in 2020, the law enforcement would probably be a lot more interested in it. But back then, not so much. So, live and learn. I still drove past that house once in a while in the normal course of life for several years, and I'd pay attention to how it looked. The vertical blinds were closed for maybe 5 or 6 years wherever I went past. Then eventually, the blinds were down, and there were decorative curtains in the window. So I assumed the place was eventually sold to someone who actually lived in it. Around 2002, maybe 2003, there was a murder of a young man on the news. He'd been found in the next state, which borders on my city, so it's not very far away. I recognised the guy from the gay community, but didn't know him personally. A friend mentioned to me something about the local serial killer. I said, what? He explained that a few young men had gone missing over the past year, each after being at one specific dive bar, and each being found several miles to the north, past the state line and out in the country. The case on the news matched up with that MO. My friend told me the young guy had been at that bar and left with someone the night that he disappeared. The news report didn't mention anything about a gay bar or similar recent cases, of course. I had to wonder if my acquaintance from the internet had anything to do with it. The location of the murders apparently was nowhere near that duplex, at least according to the story I was told. I never heard of a resolution to that murder on the news, or any official mention of a suspected serial killer, other than some gossip. So, that happened. That account is truly chilling, but what if the horror doesn't come from a place? What if it comes from a job? Our next story comes from someone working the night shift, where the darkness brings out things that shouldn't exist. Story 5. Traumatizing Night Shift. True story. This is probably the creepiest, most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. I used to work overnight as a security guard at the local port. Usually none of the port workers would stay overnight, except for the safety official. I wouldn't be on the shift alone, since the site has a radius of nearly 2 miles. Overnight, usually, there would be 3 guards, including me. Since the area was fairly big, there were different posts, but front gate was the main entrance area, where all of the guards would be stationed overnight, since there was no need to put them in other posts due to the fact that there was no activity in the site at this time. The veteran guards that have been there for years would often say that the site was haunted, given the fact that there have been accidents and deaths that occurred in the area a long time ago. I was aware that people died there due to freak accidents, and I do believe in angels and demons since I'm actually a religious person, but I always thought that the superiors were just messing with the new guys. I would work 5 to 6 nights out of the week, and for the first few weeks I never really saw or heard anything out of the ordinary, except for maybe a few questionable creaks, and would see a few misplaced objects while doing my patrol rounds. But nothing too crazy. Just to describe the setting to you, this is a fairly big site, and on occasions when there were big projects being constructed at the port, the workers would sometimes stay overnight. Due to the fact that there were times where port workers were required to stay at the port for a few days, there's a gym in the site for their convenience. This gym is fairly old. In the gym there's a sauna, weights, and even a racquetball court. If you don't know what a racquetball court is, it's similar to an indoor tennis court with thin plastered walls and thick glass doors. Usually, on our patrol rounds, me and one of the other guards, Mike, would stop by the gym and play a few rounds of racquetball before returning back to the front gate. On one of those nights, me and Mike decided to hit a full workout instead of playing racquetball in the cage. This is around 2:30 a.m, and the entire building is so quiet that you can hear the electricity running through the lights. The air conditioner is off, and so is everything else. The only thing that's running are the lights. 15 to 20 minutes into the workout, we hear a loud thump. We crossed it off as nothing and continued working out. Then, after a few more minutes, we heard the loud thump once more. At first we thought it was our lieutenant, which could have been walking around, but then we radioed him and he gave us his location, which was front gate. We tried thinking logically on what could be making those thumps on the wall. They were coming from the court on the other side. We thought it was the air conditioner, but then we remembered that it was off. And even when it's switched on during the day, there's no reports of thumps coming from the air conditioner. After a few more minutes, the thumps started occurring, one right after another. We were very creeped out at this point, but what we were about to witness still scares the absolute shit out of me till this day. We started to approach the other side of the gym to where the glass door was. We turned on the flashlight and aimed it towards the clear glass door, and I got chills all over my body, and I started tearing so much out of fear that I was about to cry. We saw one of the balls rolling slowly by itself inside the court, but there was no one in there. So that means the loud thumps were the balls mysteriously being tossed against the wall as if someone/something was playing inside the cage. We were both so confused and frightened to how this was really happening. We couldn't make sense of any of it. We were scared shitless, and we started yelling and running away because we knew that there was probably something evil toying with us right there. As we sprinted full speed back to the front gate, the lieutenant saw us and asked why we were tearing and running in a ridiculous manner. We told him what we witnessed, and his facial expression scared us even more. He then said, "That's why there's always guards that quit often. There's something evil in the area, and it's not the first time that something that bad has happened here." He then showed us security footage of dark figures and shadows literally passing through the office areas and lights mysteriously switching on and off. Till this day, I still get chills recounting my experience with my friends and family, and I'm even getting chills right now as I'm typing this. I had never had a real encounter with the supernatural until that night. Many say that it was a demonic presence messing around. Others say it was a ghost of a dead person who died in the area. I don't know what it was, but I didn't last long in the job after that. There were other experiences, but I'll send it at a later time. Working the night shift can expose you to things beyond explanation. But what about experiences that challenge everything we believe about life and death itself? This next story comes from someone who claims to have seen what lies beyond. Story 6. I died for 6 minutes in 2003. Heaven isn't what we think it is. With apologies to the religious, I feel my story must be shared. In 2003, when I was 15 years old, my heart stopped for 6 minutes. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, at the point in my daily routine when I walked home from the bus stop. In the 4 blocks between the corner where I hopped off the bus and my front door, I started to feel nauseous. It came on suddenly, without warning. I'd felt just fine all day, ate a lunch of Bosco sticks and marinara sauce, something I'd eaten hundreds of times throughout high school. Before I had an opportunity to consider alternative causes, I broke out in a cold sweat. Then I felt the curious flutter in my chest. My heart slipped into what I later learned was an episode of ventricular fibrillation. I became breathless and collapsed. What happened next has been told to me after the fact. I apparently sprawled in the road, where a woman driving a hatchback nearly crushed my skull beneath her tyres. Instead, she screeched to a halt, tried to rouse me, then dialed emergency services when she failed to do so. EMS arrived to discover my heart had stopped beating. I was dead, technically. They transported my body to the hospital and somewhere along the way managed to shock my ticker back to life. Thus began a harrowing, weeks-long journey through the American healthcare system that led eventually to an ablation, pacemaker, and mountains of debt my family's still dealing with. But my heart's all right, and thank fuck it is, because what I learned that day has taught me never to thank God for anything. Because for those 6 minutes, as my lifeless body travelled across the city, accompanied by 2 paramedics working tirelessly to revive me, my soul transcended our world to visit the hereafter. During my visit, I learned things about our universe that I wish I hadn't. Perhaps in sharing my story, I might help our species prepare for what comes after we expire. It began with light, blinding, white, pervasive. It bathed me, calmed me. It was everything they tell you about. Beatific, welcoming, the stuff of spiritual experiences. I had the distinct feeling of ascent, like the light was lifting me skyward. I passed through several sets of gates, which my dizzied consciousness hardly registered. Upon reflection, I don't believe they were physical in any sense, and yet I recall the feeling of admittance, as if they might have prevented me from rising had they remained closed. In any event, I arrived in a place without dimension, a place beyond reality. It only made sense while I occupied it. I don't believe a corporeal being can make sense of the astral plane. Something about its intangible existence defies translation. So what I came away with were more impressions than images. I was not alone. Several life forces enclosed me upon my arrival. At first, because of my Christian upbringing, I believed them to be angels. In my incorporeal form, I made the spiritually equivalent gesture of opening my arms, anticipating their embrace. Instead, I felt myself shackled by their powers, like a collared dog. Humiliation and terror came over me. These were not the ethereal beings I'd been led to believe await us. These were cruel, unsympathetic overlords by whom I was fettered. Why, I thought, my soul wailing like a petulant child. Something like laughter returned, but it was cold, mocking. Thoughts floated into my consciousness, like birds winging in and out of sight. They delivered some horrifying truths about existence that I'll do my best to relay to you now. Our universe, like many others running parallel to it, contains a pittance of the total energy in existence. It is a farm used to produce souls, which only arise in the precise conditions found in our cosmos. When you hear scientists talk about the improbability of the existence of our Goldilocks universe, it's because they don't actually come into being spontaneously. They're designed, and the hands that craft them are not benevolent gods, but rapacious beings with little care for the creatures they create. Our ultimate purpose, I learned in the custody of the spirits that shackled me, was to ripen until we were ready to serve them on their higher plane. The Big Bang gave birth to the universe, to give rise to life, to eventuate in humanity, a sufficiently conscious organism that may be harvested for use as slaves on a higher plane, where time and space dissolve into an eternity we spend in servitude. 6 minutes in heaven felt like a lifetime, which I spent amusing what I perceived to be a childlike spirit with a penchant for psychologically distressing manipulation. It battered me around like a cat with a caught mouse, reveling in the pain it produced. Physical discomforts we imagine hell inflicting upon us pale in comparison to the torture of soul pain. Loss of a loved one comes closest, that piercing emotional damage resulting from trauma. When it became clear my time had not yet expired on earth, and I was to return, I was told not to reveal their existence to the rest of my kind. My reward, they communicated to me, would be a marginally improved station among the slave population. Alternatively, if I managed to convince others of their existence, new horrors would await me when I returned. I can't imagine anything worse than what I experienced, subsumed beneath an ineffable grief and torment. For weeks I tried to explain to anyone who would listen what I experienced. Everyone told me I'd suffered a very serious and traumatic experience for a young man, that the event left scars on my psyche as well as my heart. I gave up trying to convince them. I slowly began to convince myself that what they'd told me was true. I'd simply imagined it, a death dream, as it were, the mind reckoning with its own imminent demise, trying to make sense of the experience. Then I met someone who claimed to have met God. This was a few years later, when the author of a non-fiction book recounting their near-death experience visited my hometown. I won't reveal the author's name, as I don't want to invite a lawsuit, which I'm sure he'd launch against me if he read that I'd besmirched him. I attended a reading and afterward confronted him about his tale. I looked him in the eye and asked if he really met God, something I'm sure he's dealt with hundreds of times. He smiled and nodded, assuring me that yes, God is real and is filled with love. On a lark, I decided to tell him that I knew the truth, that slavery awaits us all. A flicker in his gaze betrayed his knowledge of the fact. He really had died and visited the afterlife, but lied about it in his book, because he knew the truth of heaven, the horrible place our souls are bound for. That was deeply unsettling. From questioning the afterlife, let's move to questioning reality itself. What happens when the person you love most turns out to be something impossible? Story 7. I found my wife's obituary online, but she's sitting right next to me. I am chronically online. I Google lots of things and people when I'm bored. I've Googled my own name before, along with friends, acquaintances, conspiracy theories, and random internet sundries. But last night was the first time I'd Googled my wife's name, and I found something I'd never forget. The first hit was an obituary. Of course, I assumed it was someone with the same name as her. Her first name is Emily, and her last name is pretty common. Not going to share it here because I don't want to be doxxed. But I clicked it anyway, just out of curiosity. My heart fell through the floor when I saw a photo of my wife on the website. Blonde highlighted hair, dark eyes, and the dates matched up too, 1986 to 2012. According to this obituary, she died when she was 26. I met her when she was 27. There's no way, I thought. This must just be someone who looks like her, with her name and her birth year. But I knew it was too many coincidences to be wrong. When I read the actual obituary, it only cemented things for me. It mentioned her love of horses, her volunteer work at a soup kitchen through her church, and her work as a biologist postdoc. So many details matched up. There was no way it could be a coincidence. What you're looking at? I jumped as my wife came in from the kitchen and sat down next to me. On instinct, I slammed the laptop shut. Nothing, I said. Then, realizing how suspicious I looked, I added, I was looking at birthday gifts for you. For a second her face froze and I was worried she wouldn't buy my lie, but then she smiled. That warm smile I loved, crinkling her eyes at the corners. That's so sweet, she said, coming to sit next to me. I swallowed. Yeah, she cuddled up next to me, but I felt completely on edge. The warmth of her skin no longer felt warm and inviting. In fact, a chill ran down my spine. After a few minutes, I extricated myself from her embrace. I don't feel good, I lied. I'm going to lie down. Oh, okay, she said, pouting. Before she could say anything more, I ran upstairs. As soon as I got on the bed, I brought up the obituary again. I stared at the grainy image of her face. It was definitely her. That warm smile, those mysterious dark eyes. There was no way it could be anyone else. I scrolled through some of the other results, and I realised some of those too were related to her death. There was a Facebook memorial page, friends posting on it, names I didn't recognise, mourning her loss more than 10 years ago. The university she worked at had put out a statement with their condolences as well. But then I found something that made my heart stop. A news article nestled at the bottom of the search results page. Emily hadn't just died, she'd been murdered. My jaw hung open as I read the news article. Phrases popped out at me. No signs of forced entry, partially dismembered, and killer still at large. The news article didn't have a photo of Emily though, so maybe this was a different Emily. It had to be. It couldn't be my Emily, who was sitting on the couch watching TV downstairs. A sound jolted me out of my thoughts, the door to the bedroom creaking open. Emily stood in the doorway, oddly still. The hall light was off, shrouding her face in shadow. Emily?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I came up to check on you," she said, in a soft, cool voice. Thanks," I said, quickly turning off my phone and slipping it behind me. "I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm fine." "I'm glad to hear that," she said, her voice going lower. I tried to keep my cool as she climbed into bed with me. I lay there stiff and cold as she wrapped her arms around me. "I love you, baby," she whispered as she cuddled with me under the covers. "I love you too." So that's where I am now. I'm writing this from my phone as Emily sleeps next to me. I don't know if I'm safe here. I don't know who or what I'm dealing with. All kinds of crazy scenarios have been floating through my mind. Did Emily have an identical twin that died and she took over the twin's identity? Is she some horrible creature from folk tales who killed Emily and took on her appearance? The more minutes that tick by, the wilder my theories get. None of them make sense. There's only one thing I'm sure of. Whoever or whatever I'm sleeping next to isn't the real Emily. That story leaves us with more questions than answers. And speaking of questions, our final story for tonight deals with mysteries that science can't explain. This one comes from someone whose job is to find answers in the dead. But sometimes the dead have secrets that defy explanation. Story 8. I'm performing an autopsy on a pregnant woman, and things keep getting stranger. I knew her. In all my years of work, I've developed a strange relationship with death. I see it as something purely physical. The body in front of me is just an organism who stopped living. That's all that it is. And yet, it took me by surprise to have her on my table. I'd seen her around the hospital before, excited, glowing, talking about what her life would look from now on. She was a bit distracted sometimes, saying that great things were coming, but I didn't expect her to die right before giving birth. She was found drowned in her own home, with writings on her wrists and on the back of her neck, and she'd been laying in her bathtub for days before her neighbour found her. She had no husband, no relatives. They expected me to rule it as a suicide. I didn't believe that since it made no sense. Why would she kill herself right before giving birth? Right before becoming a mother, a thing she'd been so excited about. I'd been called in the middle of the night to work on her. They said her body was already in a pretty fragile state, and I needed to be precise and fast before they could wrap this tragedy up. I won't weight you down with all the gory details. I'll just go over the process really fast so that you'll get an idea of what I do. First came some of the paperwork and observations, along with the external examination and photographs. I didn't notice anything besides the obvious signs of drowning and damage done by the 3 days spent in the bathtub. Although, if I'm being honest, but that might have been just me, I thought that the skin surrounding the writing, wrist's neck, was lighter than the rest and harder. Next came the internal examination. I'd been plagued by a wave of sadness, not wanting to move on with the procedure, but I tensed up and kept on working. Again, the usual signs of drowning. I froze with the instruments in hand. I was the only one in the morgue, or at least the only one alive, and it might have been the lack of sleep or the general eerie atmosphere that was making me feel unsure of what I was seeing. There was no earthly way she could have made those carvings on her ribs. Tiny carvings of the same symbols. My throat was dry, which made me feel like I was choking on air, and suddenly the collar of my scrub felt too tight for me. It wasn't my imagination. Her ribs were covered in these carvings. Could it be some bone-eating bacteria? I knew it was pointless to even ask that question, because I knew it wasn't. I took out my phone to take a close-up of the ribs. I know that wasn't too professional, but I had no choice. The moment I took the picture, something clattered in the distance. I looked up to the door to the hallway. No one should be here. I took a sharp breath and carefully put my gloves back on, feeling the blood slowly drain from my face as I worked my way down to her amniotic sac. I was expecting to see something that would make my skin crawl, and I knew that no matter how hard I braced myself, it would still hit me hard. When I opened it, it was empty. There were no signs of a fetus. It was as if it had just disappeared, leaving her placenta and the umbilical cord behind, intact. There was no baby there. I stepped back from her and took off my gloves. I rubbed my eyes. That had to be impossible. Her tummy had been perfectly round, and I'm pretty sure there would have been signs if she'd given birth before or after dying. It was inhumane, unnatural. Everything indicating a pregnancy existed, all except for the baby. I carefully closed her up, trying not to think about the missing baby and the symbols, then filled the report. I wrote suicide on it. I wasn't 100% sure of that. I didn't need to be. They'd been clear with the instructions. Just get it done. Fast. I creaked the door open and peered into the hallway. The clattering had come from the supply room, and I hadn't heard the door open or close, so what had done it was still there. I approached it slowly, holding my breath, as if I were afraid to make a sound. I placed my hand on the doorknob and twisted. Click, it was locked, on the inside. I knocked. "Hey," I whispered, "is anyone there?" What followed was an unusual sound, something like someone sucking the air through their teeth. I looked back to the hallway, ending with the morgue. The door was swinging open. I couldn't remember if I'd closed it or not, and I didn't want to. I decided my job was finished there. I closed up and got into my car, then drove home in silence. I live alone, so me coming home at 3 a.m. would not disturb anyone. After doing my night routine and going to bed, I found myself twisting and turning, strange dreams pressing onto me, like the ones you have when you have a fever. I thought I heard a cry at one point, until I realised it had been my own. I opened my eyes after what seemed like minutes, to discover it was a little over 6 a.m. In the soft glow of the morning, my window had fogged up a bit, and I couldn't help but stare, perplexed, at the fresh print of a child's hand on the inside of the glass. And there you have it, 8 terrifying tales that blur the line between reality and nightmare. From narrow escapes with serial killers to supernatural encounters that defy explanation, these stories remind us that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't understand. If you made it through all of these, congratulations. Though I can't promise you'll sleep well tonight. These stories have a way of sticking with you, don't they? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes it's better not to know what's lurking in the dark. Until next time, stay safe out there.